Anyway, I can recall the first time I ever heard of MetroLink, and Dick Gephardt, the Congressman from St. Louis, came to me when I was a new member of the Transportation Subcommittee of House Appropriations. I was brand new and I didn't know which way to go. And he said that we got a project on the east side of the river in St. Louis that is going to make a difference for years to come. I said, what is it? He said, it's MetroLink. I said, what's that all about? He said, it's a light rail service that is finally going to bring these communities together much more closely with affordable transportation for people all over. I put myself into forward gear on that project and moved forward with a lot of help from a lot of people. I don't want to take an extraordinary amount of credit, but I was honored to see it work. It's interesting, a few years ago, they asked the people of the St. Louis area, what do you think are the most significant things about the economy of St. Louis? Well, they talked about the great hospitals and the great universities, and then they talked about MetroLink, because they understand, as we do, that it is safe, modern, clean transportation. It's available to people even when the Cardinals aren't playing. And I know it's available then. But it's a project, Mr. Secretary, that is well worth investing because the touchstone of this conversation is simple. MetroLink is growing because it is needed and it's popular. Our generation put it on the tracks 30 years ago with these cars. Now we got to think about the next generation to serve this metropolitan area. There are very few things that unite this part of the world, both sides of the river. MetroLink is one of them. Proud to be part of it, and thank you for being here today.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Congresswoman Cori Bush. I represent St. Louis, Missouri, Missouri's 1st District in Congress. And I want to say, first of all, thank you so much to Secretary Buttigieg for coming today and for your steadfast leadership and your relentless advocacy for equitable transportation. As MetroLink celebrates 30 years of serving our St. Louis region, I'd like to begin by saying thank you to Bi-State President Talby Roach for all of your work. And for every single member of the Bi-State team. You all, we are so grateful for you. We know what you stood through. We know your work during COVID and beyond. And allow me to express my deep gratitude also to the People's Mayor, to St. Louis Mayor Tashara Jones. And as we stand here, I got to shout out East St. Louis and my East St. Louis family and East St. Louis Mayor Charles Powell III, behind us. Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski, my new colleague, which I appreciate working with you. It is such a joy, and I can't wait to see what we are able to accomplish next. And you know, our good Senator Dick Durbin, he is our St. Louis senator. We claim you too. 2 paychecks. Thank you for your service to this community. So whether it's to get to and from work or to access child care, our communities depend on our public transit system every single day. Today, I'm proud to celebrate the $196.3 million in transit funding awarded to Bi-State by the FTA. That funding will replace, and I hope I'm not taking your moment. I hope I'm not, but we appreciate you. But I'm so excited because we're talking about replacing 48 light rail vehicles in St. Louis's regional transportation system, and you all know we need it. I have to thank President Biden and Secretary for our partnership in securing this funding, as well as Bi-State Development for their incredible dedication. And so as we gather today, let us remember that this very week, and we just heard Talby talk about it, this very week, just last year, St. Louis got 2 months worth of rain in 6 hours, leaving many of our neighborhoods underwater. And they called it once in a 1,000-year flooding, and it happened twice within 2 or 3 days. This event devastated my district. It devastated our communities. My office and I were on the ground. We went around talking to people who couldn't get to work, people who couldn't get to school and medical appointments because the flood has significantly harmed St. Louis's MetroLink. Whole trains, station elevators, and miles of track took significant damage. Without access to transportation, public transportation, many people in our community were stuck for days. Across our country, we're seeing devastating climate disasters like the one we experienced in St. Louis and in the region. We've seen it increase with frequency and severity. We just saw it over the last few days. Their impact falls, we know, on our most marginalized communities who rely on our public transportation infrastructure to get to where they need to go. And we're not talking about a mere inconvenience, we're talking about survival. So that's why last year I was proud to advocate for and secure $214 million for public transportation systems impacted by climate disasters alongside former Missouri Senator Roy Blunt. And you can clap for that. $214 million. This funding will not only address the 2022 flood damage in St. Louis, but will go further to address transit systems all across our country. Today, we're seeing the direct impact of that funding as St. Louis gets nearly $28 million to repair light rail, bus networks, subway tunnels, ferry operators, and other transit systems impacted by the climate crisis. Everyone deserves accessible, affordable, and environmentally friendly transit systems. It's past time that we deliver that. That's why, again, I introduced my Light Rail Transit Act last year, which would provide federal grants to design and to implement new light rail projects. By investing in our transit systems, we can move closer to achieving equity, which we know our Secretary works on and our President is working on, equity in transportation on the road to transit and climate justice. So I want you all to know I will never stop fighting to save and improve the lives of the people of St. Louis and the people of this region and across our country. And I'm so grateful for the partnership of all of our colleagues who are standing up here and more for your efforts, because you're helping do the work to help my people in St. Louis and all across this country. And I look forward to working with you to help our region. Let's keep up the work. Your Congresswoman loves you. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey, and good afternoon. It is so nice to be in East St. Louis. I want to thank all the local elected leaders for joining us here today, and thank you to MetroLink President and CEO Talby Roach for giving us this recent tour and for organizing this event. Really appreciate that, for highlighting how these federal investments are supporting our transit system. It's an honor to be with you here today to celebrate new funding in your 30th anniversary of operations. I want to thank my friend, Senator Durbin, for being such a strong advocate for his hometown and for traveling with me throughout the day along with Secretary Buttigieg, and for being really a champion for all of our communities throughout downstate Illinois. So I want to say a big thank you to Senator Durbin. And thank you to Congresswoman Bush, my colleague, for joining us and for being such a strong partner, for supporting exactly what she said, our entire region. Because St. Louis's success is our success, and it must be a regional approach, and we are working together to do just that. And of course, a huge thank you to Secretary Buttigieg for joining us here today, for helping us to deliver $196 million for new MetroLink rail cars. That deserves a round of applause. And now to also mention another nearly $28 million to help this system recover from the devastating flood that this area has experienced, which Corey was just referencing. Investments like the one we're celebrating here today aren't just about upgrading railways or equipment. They're about investing in our people. They're about investing in our environment and our economy. These funds will help us bring our transit system into the 21st century, paving the way for faster, safer, and more efficient travel for passengers. And this makes our system more resilient in the face of extreme weather. And we have one example just going right by us right now in MetroLink. But announcements like this aren't just happening here in East St. Louis. They're happening all across the country. And that's why we should feel so lucky to have Secretary Buttigieg taking time out of his busy schedule to join us here today to celebrate MetroLink. And we're incredibly lucky to be joined today, as I was just saying, by someone who is leading the charge in transforming our infrastructure, someone who is helping to create good paying union jobs as we implement the bipartisan infrastructure law, and someone who is helping to ensure that these investments are helping us to tackle the challenges of climate change that we all feel very much every day. I am thrilled and so honored to introduce to you today Secretary Pete Buttigieg.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much. And happy birthday, MetroLink. It's great to be here with you to mark that. And we're here because, as an administration and as a department, we believe in public transit. We recognize the importance of transit for making it possible for people to get through daily life, for being part of the solution to climate, for being part of how we can bring greater equity to transportation, getting people to where they need to be regardless of where they live. And I know everybody up here believes in the same. So I want to thank Toby Roach, and I want to thank the whole team. Importantly, all of the operators, the mechanics we just met at the facility, everybody who makes this possible. They don't even have the option of coming in on Zoom. They've been here every day through the worst days of COVID. We're so thankful. I want to thank Representative Budzinski, who has immediately established herself as not just a hardworking but an effective representative for this district in the United States Congress and a partner to this administration in delivering this infrastructure decade that we are launching right now. Thanks very much. Likewise, Representative Cori Bush, who understands the importance of fairness, the importance of confronting climate change with our transportation decisions, and the importance of transit. And as we'll say a little bit more about in a moment, worked so hard to get this funding here. Thank you for crossing the river and welcoming us here to this region. Senator Durbin, who, as you know, is not just a giant in Illinois, but one of the towering leaders of the United States Senate, without whom we wouldn't be here at the outset of an infrastructure decade. He is proud of East St. Louis. I know East St. Louis is very proud of him, and you should be. We're so thankful to be able to work with him. To my friend Tashara Jones, Mayor of St. Louis, and to Mayor Charles Powell, who is welcoming us here to East St. Louis. The job of mayor has only become more demanding and certainly no less important than back when I had that title. And you were wearing it well and doing such important work. So thanks for everything you do. We hope to be a wind at your back. Well, I will say, I spent 8 years as a mayor, but I never had the experience of a federal administration coming through with this kind of funding back when I was mayor. So I'm glad that we're able to offer that support as part of the Biden-Harris. We're here because we know how much transit means to people, and we know that this community has been through a lot. I'll never forget what it was like when I woke up in the middle of the night, hearing one of those 20-minute downpours that we're used to here in the Midwest, and then hearing it go on for an hour, and a second hour, and a third hour, and by 3 a.m., we were activating the Emergency Operations Center of our city for the first time in a while, confronting what would come to be called a 1,000-year flood. And then 18 months later, we had another one. And I know that this community went through something similar. A year since the St. Louis region was hit by flooding that claimed 2 lives, left thousands of homes damaged or destroyed. And I know that this community even now is recovering and rebuilding from that. And when disasters like that hit, they don't just damage homes or affect lives and livelihoods, but also infrastructure that we all count on. They wash away roads or bridges or impact transit systems that we count on every day. And it's in that immediate aftermath of a disaster that first responders are relying on that very infrastructure to reach people in need. And then in the months and the years that follow, communities rely on that infrastructure to get back to work and begin recovering and getting back to normal life. So I want you to know that the entire Biden-Harris administration, the Department of Transportation, and as you have seen, our partners in Congress are here to support that every step of the way. Last December, Senator Durbin and Representative Bush helped lead the way in Congress to pass legislation to ensure communities like East St. Louis would have the funding that they need to rebuild. And that's why today we're pleased to announce that we are awarding nearly $28 million from that funding to the St. Louis metro area to do just that. And that comes alongside the $196 million that we announced for this community back in May to replace those 4 dozen aging light rail cars, many of which were also impacted by those floods. And so it's fitting that we're here to make this announcement and celebrate that historic funding, given that this is the 30th anniversary of this important community asset. Because now you will have newer, safer, faster trains to get you around the community for many years to come. And I should mention that that funding came by way of President Biden's historic infrastructure law, which we are now smack in the middle of mobilizing and getting those dollars out to communities. Now, both of those awards, we're competing with the rush hour here. Look, those awards, you should know, were each some of the largest projects we funded within the respective programs it came from. And we're proud to deliver that much needed investment because we see a community ready to put it to good use. We have to note that these so-called once in a millennium or once in a century events are happening more and more often. In fact, a few weeks ago, we were looking at a once in a century storm in Vermont, which happens to be the second one that they've seen in 12 years. And as I mentioned, when I was mayor of South Bend, we saw 2 such events 2 years apart. It feels like every week we are hearing about a new flood or storm or wildfire or heat wave or drought or other extreme event in America. And since we are seeing this with our own eyes, we know as leaders our duty includes doing something about it. In terms of our transportation work, that means supporting recovery and rebuilding efforts, and it means ensuring that our infrastructure is built to withstand the extreme weather that we know is coming more frequently and lasting longer. Now, the funding we're announcing today will help 17 communities in 8 states and territories rebuild and repair their transit systems. In New York, it's rehabilitating the New York City 57th Street substation damaged during Hurricane Ida. It means repairing vehicles and replacing a transit center in Kentucky, which was hit hard by severe storms and landslides last summer. In Puerto Rico, it means helping a major railway network and rebuilding from the catastrophic damage of Hurricanes Maria and Isaias. But it's not just about recovering after a disaster, it's about preventing that damage from getting worse in the future. In April, through President Biden's historic infrastructure law, we opened applications for the first round of a new program designed to make our highways, transit, port, and rail systems more resilient in the face of that extreme weather that we know is coming. Because the simple reality is that disasters like what this community has faced will happen more and more often. But the good news is transportation doesn't have to just be a casualty of climate change. It can be a big, big part of the solution. And when we strengthen public transit, that's part of that solution. Even if you don't use transit, you benefit from the people who do because it means there's fewer cars on the road and less traffic. And when we improve road safety, it means it's easier for people to choose to walk and bike. When we build EV chargers and when we make sure they are equitably available and distributed, that makes it possible for drivers in every part of the country to get around. And all of these efforts mean cleaner air, lower emissions, and a new generation of good-paying jobs. So as East St. Louis and communities all around this region and around this country are continuing to rebuild and recover, we want you to know that we are with you every step of the way. We understand the power of good transportation policy, not just for transportation geeks like us who are excited about this stuff all day and every day, but for people who shouldn't have to think that much about transportation. Because the more we take care of the basics of everyday life, the more the people who are commuting to work or headed to school or going to wherever it is they need to be on that train going by are empowered not to think about whether they can afford to get to where they need to be or where they can live in a place that they can afford that's actually sufficiently close to where they work, or whether they can get a glass of clean, safe drinking water out of the tap, or whether they can access the internet or any of the other things that ought to be basic. If we take care of those basics, they can be focused on faith and family or entrepreneurship or their studies or whatever it is that brings meaning to their lives. We worry about these things so that others don't have to. That is public service, and that is what the leaders here have been making possible for the people who live in this region. We are here with you. We admire that spirit, and we'll be with you for years to come. Thanks very much for the warm welcome these days. Like I said, it's only gotten harder to be in the city. That's why
Thanks for being sorry.
yeah, we did.
Something on time. What are you doing next?
Back to the kiddos. When's that fair? Coming up 16th. Okay, a couple more weeks.